Welcome to MYD Global YouTube channel. I'm your host, Leanne Hackman-Carty, and this is where we talk all things disaster. Today in the studio, I have with me Natalie Gibson, who's president of InnoVisions and Associates out of Airdrie, Alberta, Canada, which is just north of Calgary. The reason I've asked Natalie to come to speak with us today is really because Natalie is one of the best economic developers when it comes to business retention and expansion programs. And you'll hear over the next few minutes about why this kind of program is important for a community, in particular when it comes to disasters. So Natalie, thanks for being with me today and being able to share some of your expertise with our audience. And maybe before we get started, you can just explain a little bit about who Natalie is and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you very much, Leanne, for having me. I am an economic development expert. I started on this journey by helping businesses thrive and grow, and expanded into business coaching, and now working with communities on how to develop programs that are relevant and current to support their business community. And ultimately that impacts or affects the quality of life in a community.
Now, I know you've been an elected official. You have been a consultant for many years, and you've worked for government. And so you've got a very diverse background in this area. And I guess for those who are watching that may not understand what is a business retention and expansion program, can you explain, just define in layman's terms, what it is, what a BRE program is?
It's a strategy. Business retention and expansion is working with your existing business community and finding ways to help them overcome their barriers or their challenges, and developing programs that are relevant to them to help them thrive and grow and pursue opportunities. So it's a focused strategy that you develop programs that fits your unique business community.
So if I'm a small business watching this, I'm listening going, this doesn't apply to me. Maybe explain what is a small business, and you know, I know different governments define it differently, but in your opinion, what you've seen in communities, are there lots of small businesses, or?
Small business is the backbone of the Canadian economy. Is in all of our municipalities, we have micro businesses, so businesses under 5 employees are actually the largest portion of businesses in Canada. Is the federal government defines small business as being under 100 employees. But you think of the makeup of your community, and the likelihood is you don't have a lot of 100 company or 100 employee companies. The majority of them are micro businesses. This is also the hardest segment, or the one that resources can support the most, because they're doing it all. They're wearing all of the hats.
If I'm a small business and I'm listening to this too, I'm thinking, you know what? I have to do so many things in a day. I can't even think about being prepared. I don't have the money to develop a big, grandiose plan. Like, what can I do as a small business to even help be more resilient if a disaster were to happen?
That's a really good question. Is being able to prepare your business community is to let them know about continuity planning. And that isn't something that businesses would regularly take a look at. Is they're busy running their business. They're not thinking about planning for a disaster. They're not thinking about how to review what their insurance documents cover or don't cover, for that matter. We're finding as high as 40 and 50% of the businesses don't have adequate insurance or don't have the documents that they need in recovery phases. So being able to build the awareness of the business community of these are things that are essential elements of doing your business before a disaster. So there's the pre-disaster planning and the post-disaster planning that have to take place as well.
Yeah. And what about, say, you're a community watching, or someone who's an economic development officer that's watching, and they say, you know what, that's fine if you've got a big municipality, you've got lots of money, you've got lots of programs, lots of resources to have this grandiose business retention and expansion plan. Lovely. But in my case, I work alone. I'm in a community that has very limited resources to do anything. I can't possibly take on a business retention and expansion program or a business visitation program. Tell me, what would you tell them?
It's a really good question, and one we get asked frequently is the reality is a formalized business visitation program gives you baseline data on your businesses. You have to be able to gather that information in a consistent way, and it can start as simple as coffee meetings, in getting to know the business community, being able to say, what are your products and services? What's your market access? Have you thought about continuity planning? Different things like that. So you can begin to build that information one business visit at a time. You can amalgamate the data into a consistent format that you can then analyze the business trends and see what is happening to your business community now and again after a disaster strikes. So a business visitation program is always the starting point that I recommend. It's scalable. Individuals that do the business visits can increase and do more visits, what I call progressive interviews, which you start with DNA, just basic information, and you expand over time. So it is doable, and in most cases it's not expensive to implement as well.
Okay, and now wearing my conspiracy hat, if I know that there's the odd business that would rather not give their information about who they are and that they exist, and they don't trust a municipal, a person coming out and asking all these questions because why do you want my information? So how do you kind of position that kind of visitation to be something that's not a threat? It's something that's actually a value add to them.
That's a really good question. Starting with the I'm from the government and I'm here to help you philosophy, is designing the program to speak to the benefits of what does it mean to the business community, because the outcomes are to help the business community, to provide testimonials of how the information will be used, what is confidential, what will be moved forward in an amalgamated summary, and never an individual business singled out in any manner so there could be repercussions. It's not about increasing your tax assessment. So being able to develop a marketing strategy to say what it is and what isn't is really important. And being able to communicate that not only to the business community, but also within your internal stakeholders within your municipal, or provincial, or federal government. So everybody understands it is about helping the business community pre and post disaster and what type of programs can support them. As a rule, once we've started the program, businesses will refer us additional business friends or colleagues to be part of the program once they see how it will work.
Yeah, that's great, because I know that a lot of times, people, especially home-based businesses, they don't want to identify themselves because they are scared, I'm going to have all these costs and regulations and additional things that I just don't want to have to deal with. And so if they understand the purpose and why something like this, the value to them, I think that's a big part of it. So we've had a chance to participate on a few technical teams over the years, going to communities post-disaster, meeting with businesses, talking to them. In your opinion, are there some tactics that stand out, things that actually worked really well that other communities could replicate, or maybe something they should not do because you've seen the impact of a negative impact as a result? Anything?
One that comes to mind is, and it's data-driven, 100% data-driven, because the outcomes then were because of the data. And it was the community of Canmore in 2013. There was an individual team or two young men that developed a program that they engaged the tourism operators of the community. They gathered the basic information, contact information, number of employees, products and services. After the 2013 floods hit and all of the news media was showing and broadcasting the main highway, the Trans-Canada, was shut down, that's what was focused on the media. So these two young individuals reached out to their business community and said, so what's happening? How are you? Are you in need of repairs? Like, what's the status of your business? Are you open? Are you closed? The majority of the businesses were in fact open, but they said the cancellation rates were coming from their primary tourism consumers, not only this year but in the year forward, were canceling. They determined those customers were primarily from Edmonton and Calgary. So within 3 short days after the disaster, these 2 individuals developed a marketing program that won international awards called Discover Our Backyard. And it advertised to Edmonton and Calgary saying, not only are we open for business, look at all these other resources that we have in the area. It was so successful after that, the city of Calgary even picked it up. So that's a perfect example of what you can do with data. On the flip side of that is consider the situations like the Fort McMurray fires or municipalities that don't have business licenses. As you try to collect data and contact your businesses to measure their state after an emergency, is something as simple as phone numbers or emails or how is your staff affected or are you open for business. If you don't have that basic DNA information, you have no way to reach them. Yeah. Even downtown Calgary after the flooding, it was difficult to reach the business owners and the different commercial operators to find a way to reach them when the entire downtown was shut down. So that's an example of what happens in the absence of data.
Yeah, and I think, it's always easier to talk about this stuff in advance and you're not as stressed. But then you add a disaster into the scenario and all of a sudden, all these things that you took for granted are not there. You don't have data. You don't have any way to connect with people. All of a sudden you're trying to figure out, well, who does what? But having plans in place, having programs that you understand who the businesses are, what kind of assets they have, can they help you in the recovery effort, the response effort? All of those things are important things to think about in advance. And if you have the advantage of being able to talk this through in your community in advance, you're going to be far better off when it comes to the response and recovery. I know with the stats that we teach, it's 1 in 4 businesses will not reopen after a disaster. It's 25% of your business community. That's significant. And I've heard it's actually higher in some scenarios. So, understanding that potential impact, and if you can do things like put BRE programs in place in advance, it's going to be just a phenomenal asset for the community. Natalie, anything you'd like to close with? Something we forgot? Maybe some resources that you draw from that you could point people to?
I always look to see where the successes have been, and that on the Economic Developers of Alberta website, there are some tools and resources there. We teach business retention and expansion, an online course through the University of Calgary. Economic Developers of Alberta and the International Economic Development Council, which is the North American division, also have resources that are existing. So go and find what resources are scalable to your community, to your particular department or your volunteer organization. There are some really good templates out there. Increase your level of knowledge as to who would be your partners in pre and post disaster and business retention. Who can you connect to? Who are traditional and what I call non-traditional partners? Utility companies, banks, different funding institutions. Because one of the hardest things after a disaster hits is cash flow kills companies. And it's the absence of cash and lines of credit right after a disaster hits, and then interpreting the insurance documents. So the more time you spend with your business on that continuity planning, the more it benefits them in the recovery phase.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. And so that concludes our episode for today. And I want to once again thank Natalie Gibson for being here with us and sharing her expertise on how to develop a business retention and expansion program. And if you're interested in getting more information on disasters, just keep tuning in, subscribe to our channel, and we will continue to upload new videos weekly. We'll be doing MYD minutes on little clips of resources and products and interviews with other experts in the field that hopefully can share some best practices and some on-the-ground advice that they've learned sometimes through the School of Hard Knocks. And so thanks again, and until next time, stay safe.